A former student at the University of Saskatchewan is taking the university to court over racism allegations. Tim Haggstrom was slapped with the allegations of non-academic misconduct after writing an open letter to his peers, which encouraged open discussion about race and racism. This happened amidst the broader debate concerning the university's policy on providing exam accommodations for students who self-identify as Indigenous. The university has demanded that he apologize, but he has refused. And Tim Haggstrom joins us now to discuss this. Tim, thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thanks, Jeanette, for having me on.
Thank you. Okay, so Tim, what led you or inspired you, I guess, to write this open letter in the first place?
I just want to begin by making clear I'm only speaking here in my personal capacity, going back a few years now to when I was a student at the College of Law. And at that time, basically what inspired me is I have a personal belief that every person has an inherent dignity and worth. And along with that, an ability to communicate with other people, even when there's a situation of conflict. I felt at that time at the university that this perspective was losing focus, and I thought it was worth repeating.
Okay, so what activities had you seen on campus that were concerning to you?
Well, you mentioned this policy about exam accommodations that was designed for the benefit of Indigenous students. And at that time, it was a subject of discussion among students, and really the latest one in what I felt was becoming a pattern. So I talked to some students who were very concerned about race issues and adopted a specific worldview on it. And in this worldview, a person identifies with their own ethnic group and then feels that sincere and open communication is either not possible or not worthwhile with people outside that ethnic group. And in my observation, this was toughest on people who adopted that worldview and felt that they belonged to a very small ethnic group. I just, among other things, didn't feel anybody should go through law school feeling so isolated.
Okay, so in short, then what did you write in your letter?
Well, I expressed that I think it is worthwhile to try dialogue, including when there's a conflict as tough as the one that was going on at that time.
Okay, all right. So, how surprised were you then by the university's response to the letter and the demand that you apologize? What did you say that was so offensive to them?
Well, I was surprised. I would have thought that the university would agree with what I wrote, and as I understand the decision that the university made, they felt that in this context, it basically inflamed things to encourage dialogue. I suppose the other view would be that if everybody sort of stopped talking about this, it might go away.
Okay, so had anyone else on campus responded in a negative way to what you wrote, or was there backlash from other students or student groups?
It's an interesting question. What's actually not captured in sort of this court case, because it's a conflict that's going through the court system. But at that time, there were a lot of students and some professors who were very supportive of what I said, who agreed with me. And as far as I know, all of the backlash is sort of channeled into this complaint. So there were several students who took issue with my views, and they've now had their day in court, so to speak, because the process so far has been entirely at the university.
Okay, so what was the issue? That Indigenous students were allowed an accommodation for an exam, and you just thought it was unfair treatment, basically, like in a nutshell?
No, I did not express a view. I've never formed a view on that issue. I was really concerned about, are people going to talk about this? And more specifically, I don't accept this worldview where you can't talk to people outside of your own ethnic group. I think that was deteriorating the social situation at the college. And I wanted to encourage people to consider another worldview in which you actually can talk to people, including when there's
Hmm.
disagreement.
Okay, so you mentioned this was a few years back when you were in law school. So why have you waited to launch this legal action now?
Well, I think the short answer is the wheels of justice just take a while to turn. So I've been dealing with this diligently. I received notice of the complaint, I think it was April 28th, 2022. They gave me 2 weeks to reply, and I initially replied in about 2 hours. Um, I can't in law ask the court to review my case until the university has gone through all of its processes. So that involved trying to do a mediated conversation to resolve this. Then that didn't work out. We proceeded to a formal hearing. It took a while for lawyers to get ready for that, for the university to decide it. And then on top of that, there was another appeal process. So this is the first time that this case becomes public record because we're now in court. But we're moving through things as quickly as I think we can, just given that the wheels of
I
justice
know
turn at
it's
this
always,
pace.
yeah, it's always a snail's pace when it comes to the courts, unfortunately. So, Tim, what are you hoping the outcome will be for this?
Well, courts have long said in Canada that freedom of expression is vital to a free and democratic society. So I hope the court will side with us in this case and just uphold that principle.
Okay. And what do you say to other university students who might be afraid to express their views about sensitive issues on their campuses?
Well, I think I actually addressed that in the second last paragraph of my open letter, so people could read that, and I stand by it. And I guess in short, I'll put it this way. So back in 2022, I was concerned about this issue. I grappled with my conscience. I knew some people would disagree with what I said, um, but I felt that speaking up meant that I could maintain my integrity and do a service to my own soul, as I put it, and to the community. So that's what I did. And obviously, there's been some backlash, but I'm so glad that I did speak up.
Tim, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about your experience. We appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
We want to continue this discussion now on free speech with attorney James Kitchen of Kitchen Wells LPP. He's also formerly of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. James Kitchen, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so James, first your thoughts on this letter that Tim Haggstrom wrote. What was, was he within his rights to write this letter?
Well, absolutely, as far as the letter of the law, and I would say what the law should be in a country that aspires to actually be free and democratic. I read the letter, actually thought it was quite benign, quite well done. It was academically researched, it was well argued, it was well articulated. Really, it's what should pass as standard fare for academic discussion in an academic institution. It's really sad, actually, that something like that now is called racist, or God knows what else they would have called it. Because 30, 40 years ago, that would have been standard fare, as it should be, right? So it's not just necessarily a matter of free speech protecting some sort of rankus, rowdy, rough speech. I mean, his letter actually isn't at all that, having read it myself and I've have a lot of experience with free speech and people who go pretty far. He didn't at all. So it's really sad that that first of all, people made a big deal about it, but then that he actually got in trouble for it.
Yeah, so what about the university's reaction? Did that surprise you at all?
No, no, it doesn't. That's just where we're at now, the last 10, 15 years or so. Um, I'm still pretty young, so when I went to university, which was about 15 years ago, so or now, um, that was just the tail end of where you could get away with having a candid discussion like this about things. The last 10 years or so, though, you can't, and this is where the universities live, and they live in this weird bubble where you can't say anything that might be contrary to the woke ideology that they all subscribe to. And so I'm not surprised to see this level of censorship. It's unfortunate, but it's not surprising.
Okay, so what kind of environment then does that create for students?
Well, first of all, they don't grow academically or intellectually. They leave just as I think intellectually stunted as they are when they go in. Um, Not to say that people who don't go to university are intellectually stunted. That's not what I meant. What I mean is that they don't actually grow, because how can you grow if you don't get exposed to new and diverse ideas, have your ideas challenged, and debate ideas? I mean, this is pretty basic, right? This goes back to universities being founded 1,500 years ago. So there's that, but also they learn fear, right? Censorship, self-censorship, I'll get in trouble if I don't speak up, which is a significant problem with the Canadian population generally. And you wonder why. Well, it goes back to this, right? This has been a problem at universities now for a while, just getting worse and worse and worse. So all you learn is that you better toe the party line or you're going to get in trouble. You're going to lose your job. You're going to get kicked out. You're going to be excluded. You're going to be ostracized. You're going to be publicly humiliated, whatever. That's all you learn. And those are terrible things to learn.
Oh, boy. Okay, also today, a former president of the University of Saskatchewan, Peter McKinnon, is speaking out against a mandatory anti-racism, anti-oppression, and unconscious bias faculty development program. So in a statement, he says, quote, dissent, contrary views, or even nuance are neither expected nor tolerated here, end quote. So how common is this on Canadian university campuses?
Very common. In fact, I think you have to
like.
Yeah, you'd have to look quite far, quite hard to find an exception to that. Actually, that is the status quo. That is the par for the course at the universities. It's what I mean. I do some student free speech cases, a lot of student religious discrimination type cases. I do a lot of that actually. I like doing that. It's important, and that's what I see over and over and over again. Right, the moment you slip and misgender somebody, you're in big trouble. You're potentially kicked out of your program, right? The moment you espouse a mildly conservative view on something that dissents from the woke heterodox, you're in trouble, right? And it's very intolerant. It's very oppressive, and it's totally antithetical to what these institutions are supposed to be about. So the president's absolutely right. I read his comments in that article, and he's absolutely right. That's where we're at.
Okay. So, James, what's the difference between free speech in the U.S. compared to freedom of expression contained in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Well, there's two differences. One is on paper, because the Americans were smart enough to figure out a quarter of a millennia ago that rights mean nothing unless they are actually absolute. So long as you can limit them, you will end up limiting them out of existence, which is exactly what's happening in Canada, right? So we got our British heritage, right? We put that into the charter, 40 some odd years ago, and we've taken free speech, which was pretty comparable to the US and to the UK historically, and we've taken it from this and we put it down into this, right? Because we put in writing in our Constitution, oh, we can limit this. Stupid idea. Stupid is the word for that, right? The Americans decided, like I said, in 17, whatever it was, 80 something, that they're going to have absolute free speech. And now it's lasted almost a quarter of a millennia. That's no surprise, because that's the only way it can last, is if it's absolute. So that's writing. Practically speaking, though, the culture around all of this politically and legally in the US is that we're going to actually uphold this. We're going to actually uphold what's written down. In Canada, if you look at what's written for free speech protections, it's fairly strong, not as good as the Americans. But then you look practically, and it doesn't line up, right? You see all this censorship. You see very limited free speech. And you actually look at what the charter says, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And that's because the political legal culture is very much, let's limit free speech. And so free speech in Canada is, I would say, on life support. I wouldn't say fully dead, but it's definitely on life support. There's not much of it left. So there is a wide gap, practically speaking, between Canada and the US, wider even than what you would see in the written constitutions.
Wow. Okay, so if that's the case, then how do Canadians, and especially young Canadians, engage in the public square without fear of reprisal?
They can't without fear of reprisal. That's just it. They have to be courageous. That's where we're at now, right? I don't know if it's quite as bad as Eastern Europe in the mid 20th century, but it's because you're probably not going to get beat up yet in Canada for what you say that's offensive to the government authorities or the woke mob. Well, you might on university campuses, I suppose, but generally you're not going to get beat up, but you are going to lose your job. I deal with that all the time. You're going to get kicked out of programs. Yeah, you can't do it without fear of reprisal. That's just it. It's gotten to the point now where the only way you can really express your views fully, openly, and candidly, if they're different than the heterodox, is that you actually have to do it with great courage and willing to engage in sacrifice, right? That's how it is. I'll give you one example with lawyers. I know lawyers who won't speak up like I will. Why? Not only because they're scared of the law society, of course, also because they're scared of losing clients, right? You got to put food on the table. But that's where we're at in Canada. No, you can't without having great courage to overcome the fear, because the fear is real.
All right. Well, James, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
That was James Kitchen, attorney with the Kitchen Wells LPP, joining us today to discuss free speech. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.